Well, welcome to question 123 of the Secunda Secundae. The topic for this lecture is fortitude, and I am Dr. Thibault. While we are covering a new cardinal virtue, fortitude. So we have already covered prudence, and then we covered justice, and now we are in fortitude. Lastly, we will be covering temperance. Um, Within this lecture, we are dealing with the virtue of fortitude in itself. Now, to start with, let's go to the catechism to kind of put a placement about it. In some ways, the catechism gives a more thorough explanation, more thorough and more concise than St. Thomas with 17 questions to kind of define it. Helps to start with a definition. So fortitude, according to article 1808, fortitude is a moral virtue that ensures firmness in difficulties and constancy in the pursuit of good. It strengthens the resolve to resist temptations and to overcome obstacles in the moral life. Virtue of fortitude enables one to conquer fear, even fear of death, and to face trials and persecutions. It disposes one even to renounce and sacrifice his life in defense of a just cause. The Lord is my strength and my song. In the world you have tribulations, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Catechism. So this is all. Catechism is very Thomistic. So these principles that are found within that section get unfolded here. So that just kind of helps give a context. So St. Thomas's definition of fortitude comes from Aristotle. So virtue is that which makes its possessor good and renders his work good. So we've covered virtue before, but this is the repeated definition of virtue. How a man's good is to be in accordance with reason. So if the whole idea is that one possesses, one is to become the possessor of the good, then the question is, what is the good? But man's good is to be in accordance with reason. Now, careful not talking about all the questions at once, but we dealt with to determine what is reason, we look to prudence, which is an intellectual virtue, which tells us what is according to reason, following good counsel. And then justice also finds what is according to reason in terms of the rational appetites. So according to rationality and the common good, how does one determine what is the reasonable way? And now that we have determined what is reasonable, will a person choose to be reasonable even when it is difficult? So will you continue along that path of reasonableness, doing what reason dictates, or will you allow difficulties, challenges, hindrances, or the appetites to get in the way of doing what reason dictates? So this would be under prudence. We're dealing with counsel here, right, or command. Right, we have had good counsel. There has been a judgment, and now there is the command, the actual doing of that reasonable, what is reasonable. And fortitude keeps us constant, right? It keeps us from becoming inconstant, where we have begun a good work, but we give up for whatever reason, or we quit. In case of fortitude, that's to overcome fear as the hindrance of fear. One would be setting on a good path, but then it gives up because they're afraid. So fortitude keeps us from giving up on that. If that's a bit confusing, which perhaps it is, you do have to look a little bit back at prudence and justice in order to really see how fortitude fits into it because none of the virtues completely by themselves make any sense. Justice without prudence isn't really anything, and without fortitude and temperance, justice doesn't occur in reality. Uh, Whereas prudence is needed to guide all of the virtues to their right end. So these all work together, right? They're all working together. These cardinal virtues. Um, Three ways human reason makes a man good. Going back to being virtuous is about pursuing the good. You rectify reason to itself. That's really prudence, it's an intellectual virtue. So rectifying reason to itself uh, by establishing it in human affairs. First, you have to have good counsel, follow the good counsel. You have to have judgment. You have to agree to it, consent to it, and now you actually need to put it into action, establishing it in human affairs. This would be synesis and nome, those powers within prudence that would guide this. Um, by removing, and lastly, by removing obstacles to establish rectitude in human affairs. Now, that last part is particularly important to fortitude, this last part, because fortitude, uh, it's not the rectifying reason that's really prudence. It's not establishing it in human affairs. In some ways, that's prudence and justice. But it's removing the obstacles to establish rectitude in human affairs. That's fortitude's job to overcome uh, those challenges. Um, Also, temperance. Right? Temperance deals with the concupiscible, those actions of the appetites that are sensual to us, and uh, fortitude deals with the irascible, those which are difficult, those which are challenging, uh, those that make us afraid. Right? A person, uh, if you consider Christians in Pakistan, or poor area of Pakistan, uh, where if you get sick, nobody will help you unless you become a Muslim. And if you become a Muslim, then they help you. If not, you starve on the street. So there's this push, become a Muslim or starve, or your family will starve. Um, this is the irascible. It's not concupiscence where one is following one's pleasures. One is dealing with outside pressure. Right? So that's irascible. So to remain a Christian in that situation requires fortitude, temperance. So, in the two ways in which this happens. So, through being drawn by some object of pleasure or something other than that which reason requires, that would be concupiscence. Therefore, what would overcome that would be temperance. And then the second one is the will being declined to follow that which is in accordance with reason because of some challenge, something that would scare you away. That would be the irascible appetite. Therefore, fortitude is really this 3B in this section of dealing with being good. How to be good is the question. How to be virtuous. Now, there are false fortitude as well, and St. Thomas brings this up to an objection two, response to objection two. I thought it would be useful, even though, a whole slide dedicated to an objection is kind of, we could be here forever if I did that for all of the objections, but I thought this one was particularly detailed and maybe helpful. It also reminds me of those false prudence, sham prudence. This is kind of like sham fortitude. So I thought it was relevant. So when one intending to that which is difficult as if it were, that would be somebody who has false prudence. And now St. Thomas gives three examples through ignorance, right? If a person, something that is would typically require a great deal of fortitude, bravery, but they just did it, but it's because they were ignorant of the danger, right? Perhaps there's a trail through the woods and it's known for having very poisonous snakes everywhere. You could be easily killed by these poisonous snakes in the woods here. Well, it would take somebody with great fortitude to get through that path in the woods, except if you were ignorant to the fact that those snakes even existed, right? If you had no idea that there were snakes, then you did it very easily with no fear, but that was because of ignorance. Now, the second one is by being hopeful of overcoming uh, dangers. So this could be in case of an emergency, a person could all of a sudden show bravery, but really they had no choice, and it was just what else were you going to do? You had no option. Right? That it was a terrible car crash. You got out of the seatbelt and broke the window, and you escaped the car before it blew up. Right? This was dangerous situation. You had no choice. You were hopeful, right? I could see that this is not that much of a sham fortitude. It could even be related to fortitude, but this is number two here. Um, and then lastly, through certain sciences and arts. The example St. Thomas gives is a soldier who has been so well trained that um, the soldier has been so well trained that it's second nature to be able to fight. The person through instinct, their instincts are ready for battle, whereas a typical person would be terrified by the situation. A person, because of their military training, might be able to do it without a great deal of fear. If you were to hand me a machine gun, I would probably be nervous even holding it, right? I would have fear just touching the thing, having never held a machine gun or something like that before. Whereas if somebody were trained as a Marine, they could probably hold firearms without any fear at all. Might feel more comfortable holding one than not holding one. But that was because of the science and the arts. So it's something which would typically be difficult, but they act as if it's not difficult. So it could be through training as well. Now, one could also have kind of a sham fortitude um, um, through impulses of the passions. Uh, so, I guess an example of this would be when you consider people on like game shows or something like that, where they're jumping, American gladiators or something like that, or perhaps something more extreme. They're doing something uh, very difficult, maybe the X Games or something like that, something that's very difficult, but they're doing it to win a prize of honor or a monetary prize, or to be on TV or something like that. So it's their emotions that are driving them to do something, whereas typically one would not do that. And then lastly, through chasing of proximate goods, where one thinks that something of the earthly matters are so important that they would be brave for it. Again, that one, in terms of fortitude, it's more definitional than internal disposition, because if you have done something very brave in order to get some type of earthly conclusion, there's still bravery, right? There's still bravery in that, but it's not seeking a final end, so it's kind of a sham fortitude. Uh, we'll get into it, but fortitude really is seeking a good of some kind. So if you're chasing approximate good as an ultimate good, then in some ways that you're not chasing after good after all. So there's some level sham fortitude in there. Another question, Article 2 is fortitude a special virtue? Well, fortitude exists in two ways. The first way, um, uh, fortitude in a generalized sense is a certain firmness of mind, dedication, an an ability to stand up against being dissuaded to follow your path. In some ways, that's the condition for every virtue. If everybody were to only have a virtue, so long as it was very easy, nobody would ever have any virtues. So every virtue has to have truth, for example. If you don't have a certain firmness of mind in order to persistently and consistently tell the truth, you probably won't be truthful. So in some sense, it's a general virtue, right? It's part of all virtues. On the other hand, the firmness is only in bearing and withstanding those things wherein it is most difficult to be firm, namely certain grave dangers. So it's a special virtue in terms of specific difficult situations. So in case of military battle, on the military field, and the courage one must show in order to be in the military, this is a special kind of courage. Right? It's not just uh, the teacher asks you if you did your homework and you have to say no, right? To tell the truth. Sure, there's a firmness of mind in telling the truth when there could be negative social or academic consequences, but there's far more of a consequence when in war, right? The risk of death brings it to a whole nother level. So fortitude really isn't in itself about that kind of light-minded issues. But it's really about the grave matters, which we get into in the next couple of questions. It is a special virtue because it has a special matter, namely certain grave dangers. Right? That's where fortitude really becomes takes on its own. Now, as fortitude as a moral virtue as well, you're looking at it between extremes. So fortitude really has two parts of it, and one is to overcome fear. And that's the primary one. That's the one that St. Thomas focuses on over and over again within these questions. So reason tells you to do something, your fear tells you not to. You follow reason and you overcome the fear. So that is the primary way in which one person shows fortitude. The other is to moderate daring behavior. Um, a certain amount of fear is a good thing, right? If a person has no fear at all, then they will just die, right? And it might not be for any good reason. Proper fortitude would be a person would be willing to die for a greater good. There is a willingness to die within fortitude, but defending your country or a fireman going into a burning building to save somebody's life, um, that might be proper fortitude. But if you were to run into a burning building to save a laptop, um, well, that's not fortitude. That's just being daring, right? Speeding in your car in order to a police pursuit to save somebody's life. A policeman speeding in a car might be fortitude, right? There's a certain danger with it. Um, but speeding down the road for pleasure is not the same. One is aimed at something good and one is not. So daring is too loose with one's life, right? Not properly loving one's life. Um, and fortitude balances that. So fortitude is between being too afraid and not being afraid enough. Right? Fortitude is the proper amount of fear. Um, but what is the guide to the right degree of fear? Reason. What is reasonable? Right. That's what determines fortitude is reason. Fortitude is about the dangers in death, Article 4. So we'll move right along. There's 12 articles, so it's a very long section. After 17 slides, it makes me nervous. It's hard to sometimes keep all of the details and everything straight. So again, fortitude is about, really it's about certain serious matters, right? Serious matters. So fortitude is a virtue of the irascible faculty that is not easily deterred by fear of death. That's a wonderful line from Andronicus of Rhodes. If you ever look up Andronicus, there's a lot of Andronicuses out there. So Andronicus of Rhodes, Aristotelian, about 60 BC. Great line. Fortitude is a virtue of the irascible faculty that is not easily deterred by the fear of death. So fortitude guards the will against being withdrawn from good of reason through the fear of bodily evil. So you're not going to withdraw from from reason because of fear of injury to your body. Now, if we say, well, what is the bodily evil? Well, the greatest bodily evil is death. Right? That would be the greatest bodily evil. Therefore, what fortitude is dealing with is death. That's what we're talking about. So, to love one's own life is natural, and hence it is necessary for special virtue to modify the fear of death. Another great line. Right? So it is natural to preserve your life. The love of one's life is perhaps one of the most natural things. It's part of natural law, the preservation of your own life. But if you think about this in terms of happiness, right, in terms of good moral living, if the love of one's life, the protection of one's life were the highest value, how many of us would ever leave the house, right? If we really thought that the protection of our bodily lives was the highest priority, well, we would never eat junk food for sure. Nobody would ever smoke. Nobody would ever drink. Nobody would ever eat red meat. You'd probably very seldom leave your house except for when necessary, and we certainly wouldn't be using so many plastics. There would be we would have a very different life if what we did was we thought that our bodily lives were of the highest level of importance. Now, we do live in a very materialistic time, so for most people, they kind of do think that way. But when you if you ask people to really look at their lives, people are very willing to make trade-offs within their life of saying, yeah, I really want to live a long time. Even an atheist might say that. Like, I really want to live. However, even without belief in the afterlife, I really want to live in this life. However, I still want to have a nice meal. Right? I still want to drive down the highway at 80 miles an hour. I still want to take certain risks because what is life worth if it's not lived? Right? The experience of living is more valuable than the existence of being for most people. So how do you ever justify then taking any risks with your life? Well, it takes fortitude. Right? It moderates the love of life and the risk of death. It overcomes the fear of death to a degree. Because really, every time we leave our house, we are risking death. But the only reason why that is not um, psychologically debilitating to us is fortitude. Now, how about the dangers of death and battle? Is that really what fortitude is about? In some ways, it looks like yes, and then in St. Thomas's answer, you kind of see, well, it's in many ways. So we wouldn't say that the only way in which one can be showing fortitude is in battle. That's not the only way. But fortitude strengthens a man's mind against the greatest danger, which is that of death. So it strengthens the mind against danger, death. Uh, as a virtue, it tends to the good without fleeing from fear. Tends to the good without fleeing from fear. If you think of what a military person is supposed to do, they should be trying to protect people, try to liberate people, keep people safe from terrorists, for the sake of the people of that area that you're protecting. You risk your life for the sake of the general good, the common good. It might not even be the common good of your own culture, right? Your own people of your own religion, your people of your own race, ethnicity. It could be a complete stranger, but you'd be willing to risk your life um, for the good, right? For the good. And one would overcome their fear for their own life in order to protect the common good. That that's what reason would tell us to do, but it's also, in some degrees, a somewhat selfless thing. Now, St. Thomas points out certain things are not fortitude. This is sometimes a bit like that sham fortitude. Um, if a person faces sickness, well, it's not necessarily fortitude that's keeping them going. Um, or if you're in a storm and there's a shipwreck, right? Or you're afraid of a shipwreck, it's really not fortitude. And then if you're on a trip and there are robbers and you're afraid of robbers, um, again, it's not fortitude that gets you through it because none of these things are in the process of seeking the good. So you're not seeking the good, you're aiming at the good, you're following what is the good, right? What prudence has given you good counsel to do, what you have judged is good to do. Now you have commanded it to exist, in your actions, and you're interfered with by sickness or shipwreck or robbers. You're not pursuing the good. You're just living life, right? You're just going on vacation. Um, you get robbed. It's not fortitude. Go to the 7-Eleven and you get mugged outside. It's not fortitude. Um, Now, if you are seeking the good, it's different. So, the example that he gives us of a military person. So, if your job is as a military troops and your job is to keep civilians safe against terrorists, you're putting your life on the line. Now you are seeking the good, right? You are seeking the good, uh, and there is a threat of danger, even death. To overcome the fear of death and danger, to continue to seek that good, that's fortitude, right? To overcome that fear. The example of private combat, St. Thomas uses the example of a judge, somebody like a judge who knows if they rule justly that there might be ramifications, there might be consequences to the judge acting against someone. So let's say there's a famous mobster on trial. Well, if you find that mobster guilty, the family might kill you. Do you still find the person guilty? Private combat, this one would say, if you, the pursuit of the good would be proper justice, right? If the person is guilty, you are the judge, you find the person guilty. That is what is good. Now there's the fear that they're going to kill you if you do what is good. Now, fortitude would give you that strength to overcome the fear and continue to do what is good, which would be to rule guilty if the person is guilty. Um, might they kill you? They might, right? There's no promise that you're not going to actually be killed, both in the military or the just judge. They might, but you're really in pursuit of the good, right? Good is the higher end, even higher than your bodily life. You'd be willing to risk your bodily life for the good, um, because that is the ultimate end, which is God happiness. But then there are situations, and St. Thomas gives two more, where um, not necessarily military battle. It's not military. It's not combat. One example would be, how about visiting sick who has an infectious disease? Um, Now, maybe it is better if you stay away from a friend with an infectious disease, but let's say it was a priest who's getting last rites during the plague. Um, a priest who's willing to risk his own life for the soul of the person dying, giving them last rites. Um, well, this is a person in pursuit of the good who does not flee from the good out of fear. Well, that's fortitude, right? Nobody has a sword. Nobody's killing one another. You're fighting a disease. Uh, but that's fortitude. That is fortitude. Um, or if we go back to that earlier example of the shipwreck and the robbers, now let's say you are on a good holy journey, right? Let's say you are on your way to join a monastery. You're uh, going to do some humanitarian thing, and the journey to do this thing is dangerous, and you do it anyway. Well, that is fortitude, right? Because you could have just stayed home, but you chose to do that which is good and noble. Uh, and part of that is you knew that you were risking your own life to do that which is good and noble, and therefore that is fortitude. Now, if you were to get on the same ship, on the same airplane, but to do something that is not good and noble, something just pleasurable, like going on vacation, it's different, right? That's different. One of them required fortitude, and the other one didn't. Um, Now, endurance is a chief act of fortitude, and the answer is yes. So, fortitude is more concerned to allay fear than to moderate daring. I've already mentioned that really the allaying of fear is the more important aspect of fortitude. And St. Thomas says endurance is really more difficult than aggression. And he gives three reasons. Um, One, it implies that you are being attacked. If you are enduring, you are enduring an attack. And if you're being attacked, you're probably being attacked by somebody stronger than you. If you are a big, strong person and you were getting attacked by some weakling, it wouldn't really seem like much of an attack, right? So if somebody's attacking you, presumably it's because they have weapons and you don't. They're stronger than you and you're not. Therefore, if you are being uh, attacked, that is more difficult than attacking. Right? If a person is attacking, they've laid wait, they've planned, they've gotten the weapons, they've gotten their strength, maybe they have extra people, they've weighed out the possibilities, they've planned it to win, right? They didn't plan it to lose, they planned it to win. Versus a person who has been attacked didn't plan anything. So enduring an attack is more difficult than the aggression, one who is being an aggressor. Um, Also, endurance already has a feeling of fear in the present versus aggression, which is about the future. An interesting point. But right, so if you're being attacked, if you're under siege, you're in fear. Um, Versus an aggressor who's attacking you, they're not in fear. When they're attacking you, their nervousness might have been leading up to the attack. So maybe in their planning of the attack, they had fear, but it's the person who's enduring who's in fear currently. Um, so just a distinction as well. So endurance also implies a length of time, whereas aggression is a sudden movement. So if you are enduring something, you're doing it for more than a moment. Versus an attacker could be in and out, right, real fast. So endurance is a higher act of fortitude than aggression. Okay, fortitude and habitus. So this is a good Thomistic point. A brave man, to a brave man, fortitude itself is good, and such is his end. So, uh, you know, does a does a brave person enjoy bravery? Is this good in itself? Bravery good in itself, or only for something else? And when we look at the ends, there are two ends, right? There's the proximate end, which is a step towards the end, right? They can be like honor or wealth. And these are steps to good actions, but they're not the end itself. The ultimate end, or the remote end, is the ultimate happiness, right? Which is God or happiness. Um, so, is fortitude about the proximate end or about uh, the ultimate end? Well, here's what's important with this. A person who is practicing the virtue of fortitude, which is not allowing fear to stop them from doing what is reasonable and good, um, practices it in terms of proximate ends. They practice it in day-to-day life. They practice it in the small ways, those kind of general virtue ways. They do it in extraordinary ways, in terms of doing difficult things. Um, it doesn't. You don't have to be a soldier necessarily to have fortitude. Mother Teresa's work and her sisters have a great deal of fortitude. They're putting their life at risk to help people. Any one of those sisters could get raped or attacked at any time. Probably not for money, but for who knows what reason. They're often working in non-Christian countries where you might not have the protection of being a religious sister. That might not matter to people who you're around. Working with drug addicts or people with mental illness who might not know what they're doing. So these people are putting themselves at risk, and you do it on a regular basis, right? Nothing will stop you from doing what is reasonable and good. Now, if you do this and it creates this habitus, right? This habit of bravery. Um, you're afraid of nothing then, right? You're not afraid of anything keeping you from that which is good. That then leads us to the ultimate good. It leads us to the remote end, right? If Mother Teresa's sisters can do what they do every day, if a gunman were to ever walk in and renounce Christ or I will shoot you, they're all going to get shot. None of them are going to renounce Christ. Why? They have practiced fortitude daily. Some of us who have a softer life, a more easy life, we've never been challenged in our lives, not put to risk. If kind of a middle class Christianity or an affluent Christianity, somebody comes to you with a gun and says, "Renounce Christ, or I will shoot you." They'll go, "I renounce, I renounce," and then later they'll say, "Well, I didn't mean it," but they would have renounced it in that moment. Um, because they really haven't had a lot of opportunities to practice fortitude. They haven't had as many chances, whereas Mother Teresa's sisters have practiced it on a daily basis. So there's, the approximate fortitudes, approximate ends using fortitude. You create that habitus that will lead you to that ultimate end, which is God, and nothing will dissuade you from it because you have conquered your irascible appetites. You're not afraid of them anymore, right? You're not afraid of it. Question is, does fortitude do brave men delight in fortitude? They delight in it. Well, in some sense, you can think of yes. So in some sense, yes. So if you think of a soldier, is a soldier delighted with his lack of fear, with his strength, with his power, with his unable to be defeated or afraid of anyone? Sure. right? Sure, there is some pride within that. There is a delight in not being afraid, right? Strong people. Now, in the other side, not really, because fortitude endures unpleasant things. So people are very happy with fortitude in an abstract sense, but in terms of it actually being practiced, maybe they're less happy with it. So, what is the two ways that you are enduring? Uh, un- what are the two things you are enduring under fortitude? Well, the risk of death or actual death of bodily life. Well, if they kill you, that's not such a happy thing, right? Maybe it's still, if you risk your life for a noble cause in pursuit of the good, maybe it's still the right thing to do and you're rejoicing in heaven. But it's still not good that you died in the bodily life. It's still not desirable, right? It's still not good. It would be better that you would be living, dying of, careful what I say, but the desire to live is a good life, right? Love of life did not deter them from death, but you still love life, right? And you're not looking for that bodily death. Um, and then there's also, the painful context. If they don't kill you, they can wound you. Right? They can hit you. They can hurt you. They can torture you. Right? So, as a proud man, as a brave man, happy being tortured? Is a brave man happy being killed? Well, no. Right? You'd have to be kind of a crazy person to say yes. Um, do you delight in being tortured? No. No. Whether fortitude or no fortitude, you might be willing to be tortured for the sake of the good, right? Someone like St. Thomas More, right? You could be willing to be put to death for the truth. That's fortitude. All things considered, you'd probably rather not, right? Even Christ in the garden, Father, if this chalice may pass me by, let it. Right? Is not saying he's looking forward to it. He's not jumping up and down saying, I can't wait to be crucified. He's sweating tears of blood. Uh, but he did not let fear overcome uh, what is rational, which would have been the pursuit of the good, which would have been the crucifixion for the redemption of souls. Right? So not letting fear get in the way. But it doesn't mean you're going to enjoy it. You probably shouldn't enjoy it. Now, if a person were to have their pain or their death uh, raised to God in grace, then one may find spiritual delights even in the affliction. Um, some of this you can see in the stories of the early Christian martyrs, where they're trying to feed the Christians wild animals and they're just running around laughing and not particularly afraid of the animals, whether they by the grace of God that doesn't attack them or they were just so confused by these people singing in the circus, that they just leave them alone. But these were people who found spiritual joy even in bodily affliction. But most of the time, St. Thomas points out, we're not enjoying suffering, and sometimes our suffering also leads to spiritual sorrow. Right? If you're suffering with cancer or something like that, it might be physically painful, but it might be spiritually depressing too. Right? It doesn't necessarily lead to delight. All right. Oh, great, I have cancer. Oh, great, I'm getting tortured. Right? It doesn't typically lead to spiritual sorrow, except with extraordinary grace. Um, However, as St. Thomas points out, uh, fortitude prevents us from being entirely overcome by bodily pain and spiritual sorrow. Um, so, again, maybe the example of this again would be somebody like St. Thomas More, where um, he's not looking forward to be putting to death. He's not, there could be. spiritual sadness to this, to see what's happening to his country and to his family and to his, his life, to everything. Not happy about this, about what's going on. Spiritually, he's not that happy. Uh, Bodily, he's not that happy. Um, but he knows he's following his conscience. He is doing what is reasonable, and he's pursuing the good. Therefore, it's okay, right? That's why I say brave men are not sad, right? It's not that they are delighted, but it's not that they are destroyed by it. It's okay. It's You're doing what is good. You are giving what is due to God. Let the Lord take care of the rest, right? That it's not you're not driven by the passions. This is an overcoming of the irascible appetite. It's overcoming the passions. Right? It's doing what is good. Not that you have to be excited about it or sad about it, but just kind of overcome by it. Just overcoming it. Okay, Article 9. These are long. Fortitude deals with dangers, which feels quite obvious at this point since it already has dealt with death. Um, so, again, two considerations in the operation of fortitude regarding choice. It is not sudden. The question is really, is fortitude dealing with only sudden fears, or is it dealing with something that's planned? And really, the answer is that it's dealing with all dangers, whether it's sudden or not. So, regarding choice, it is not sudden. One chooses the dangers before him. Right? A soldier going into battle is aware of what is coming. Right? They're not unaware. Why, a good Catholic soldier, before going into battle, going into a danger, you go to confession, you talk to your family, you get your affairs in order, um, you get yourself spiritually and bodily in the right order, because you don't know, right? Because there is a certain chance that you will not come out of this alive. Right? You are choosing it beforehand. Therefore, fortitude deals with danger that's foreseen. Now, fortitude also deals with danger which is sudden. Um, so, let's say you have an undercover, an off-duty police officer, and they're at the gas station, and they're in line to pay for their gas, and the person in front of them in line decides they're going to stick up the gas station, try to rob the attendant at the gas station. Well, the off-duty police officer is standing right there. They could just mind their own business and do whatever they're told. The gun's not pointed at them at that point. Or they could show some type of bravery and knock the gun down, detain the person, risk their own life, in some sense, risk their own life. Um, they didn't plan this, right? This was not part of their planning for the day. They did not go into the gas station with this in mind. Um, well, this also deals with sudden danger. But St. Thomas points out here, and we've already talked about this a bit, so I won't go into too much detail. But off-duty police officer might deal with this much better because they have already created that habitus of fortitude. Right? So, if it were me standing in line, one, I don't have any particular physical skills that would make it me a good um, person to fight off a robber. I don't have any particular skills in that, and I don't have any particular strength or weapon or anything that would make me particularly fit to do that. So in some ways, I would not be well prepared to do that, and it would probably be better if I just hand them my money and hopefully they don't shoot anyone and they stole some money and otherwise everybody's alive. That would that would probably be best in my situation. Um, but that's because I do not have a habitus of protecting in that way. So a person has really practiced this. They really have. They live it every day. Like every time a police officer goes out on duty, they have to be prepared for meeting their death that day. And I know there's a lot of criticism of police officers, and some of it is justified. But I think we also can show some sympathy for those of us who live fairly safe lives, not knowing what it feels like to every day, when you go to work, know that you might not be coming home that night. That is a added stress which most of us do not live with on a daily basis. And if we wonder why some people might make some poor decisions, well, they're also dealing with unusual circumstances that we're all not aware of, right? So, but they have hopefully, that's the point of their training, the point of their lives is to have this habitus of fortitude, um, right? It's really, it's not to dwell on the political situation now, but a police officer who shoots somebody too quickly, you know, why would a police officer shoot somebody too quickly? Run on the scene and shoot the gun before they even fully assess the situation? Probably from fear, right? Probably acting out of fear. They're panicked. They don't know what to do. They have to act, and they act in fear. Fortitude would actually keep them from shooting innocent people. Right? Fortitude directs people to right reason. Therefore, right reason wouldn't be to shoot somebody who's not armed or uh, anyway. So Braidman prepares himself when necessary, uh, whether it's preparing ahead of time or preparing for the moment. But what is known as you can't be unprepared and then think all of a sudden you're going to act with fortitude with no preparation, because it doesn't really work well that way. You have to build that habitus for whether it's long term foreseen or unforeseen. Okay. And brave men use anger in their actions. Now, this is a philosophical debate of the ancients and apparently even the Middle Ages. Um, this Saint Aristotle says anger helps somebody to be brave. Well, I think that probably is true. That proverbial mama bear image, right? If you get between mama and her baby, you will see her anger, right? And she lift a car in order to protect her child, right? You would take on somebody much bigger or stronger or armed than her to protect her child. Hopefully, a father would do the same, right? But that anger can be used in a useful way. Now, this is the debate. This is the Aristotelian school, the Peripatetics, or the Stoics. So the Stoics do not think that you should use the sensual appetites at all. That's the emotions, right? The sensual appetites, the emotions. Don't use the emotions at all. The Aristotelians think that you can use the emotions to help us, right? The emotions are actually helpful. Uh, the intellect is our reason, our will to act is necessary if the emotions aid the will to act better, right? The emotions shouldn't change the intellect, but the emotions can act to assist the will to do it, better. Um, right? An example of the mother and a child. Right? The intellect says you need to defend your child. She wills to defend her child. If the emotions aid her in her will to defend her child, that's even better, right? Her intellect and emotions are together working in the will to do that which is good. So St. Thomas clearly falls on the side of the Aristotelians on this one, not the Stoics, and thinks that the emotions can be used. Now, it's not just emotions for the sake of emotions. So, a brave man employs moderate anger for his actions, but not immoderate anger, right? So, you can use your emotions, but you raise those emotions into the light of reason. And then, the emotions guided by reason are good, right? Emotions guided without reason are irrational and bad. I think that is a good perspective, in terms of justified anger. Justified anger. Sometimes it's good to get a little angry about a situation, um, as long as that anger is rooted in reason, which is rooted in good. It is okay. If it's anger not rooted in reason, then it would be bad, right? So now we're approaching the end. Right? So is fortitude a cardinal virtue? Um, yes. In short, yes. So it is a cardinal virtue. Why is it a cardinal virtue? A cardinal virtue have a foremost claim to that which belongs to the virtues in common. It is a principal virtue, which means it's a virtue whereby other virtues find their strength, right? They're how other virtues are the agent of the principle. Right? So fortitude is the kind of a root, if you think about it. Think about the colors. You got the primary colors, and then you got the colors that are created by mixing primary colors. So you got red and blue, and then you mix red and blue, and you have purple. So fortitude, prudence, temperance, justice, these are like these primary colors. Now you can start moving them around and mixing them up, and you can get all types of colors. But these cardinal virtues are these primary, the principles of virtues, of the moral virtues. Um, Fortitude is also to act steadfastly, and therefore it does have that common virtue among other virtues, that steadfastness. Um, it acts according to reason despite hindrances or the appetites, which I feel like I've said 100 times already now, but it acts according to reason to overcome fear mostly, or the appetites. And lastly here, I apologize, my citations at the bottom were incorrect. I'm sure that was Article 11. Now we're on Article 12, the final article. Prudence, where does fortitude fit? Is fortitude the highest, the chief virtue, the highest virtue? Well, no. Not chief, it's not highest among the virtues, not highest, it's chief among the cardinal virtues. So what is the ordering if we want these ordering? Well, prudence is the best, right? Prudence perfects reason. It is an intellectual virtue. It is the queen of virtues. It guides uh, all the other virtues to right action, right? They all might pick what they're doing, but prudence tells you how to get there, right? Prudence in some ways is the roadmap, it's the GPS that gets you to your destination. Without prudence, you don't get out of the driveway. You get lost. Prudence tells you how to get there. Justice tells you through the rational appetite what is the end you're looking for. What are you doing? What is the right end? That is important. Justice, also very important in terms of communal living. The common good is very important under justice. Now, fortitude um, is now third, right? It is third most important because um, justice has set the end point. Prudence has told us how to get there, but along the way there might be obstacles getting in the way of stopping us, right? Fear, right? Things of fear stop us from getting to our final destination. We have good counsel. We have made a judgment. We have made a command, right? We're commanding it. We're acting. But will we continue to act when something comes up that makes us afraid? Right? Fear comes up. Well, to overcome that, to get to that final end, to keep on that path set out by prudence, we need to overcome those irascible appetites, which is fortitude. So rather necessary, right? You can know what the end is. You can have the path to get there. If you give up along the way because you get afraid, nothing happens. Right? So it might be third, but it's also essential, right? Fortitude and temperance are really essential, even though they might be the third and fourth. Temperance is to what happens if you're along the way and you get enticed by the appetites, the sensual appetites, food or sex or something like that. Will you still continue to your end? Temperance guides those, right? So whether it's negative or positive along the way of hindrances, that's really quite necessary because otherwise, prudence and justice only work when the path is straight and easy and there are no obstacles. Well, that's really not virtue. Right? Virtue is really dealing not simply with what is easy and requires no effort, but that which aims us in the direction there's difficulties. Right? We're no longer in the garden, as we might say. In the world of today, we need the virtues in order to get to the proper end. Otherwise, we'll pick the wrong end, we'll pick the wrong path to get there, and we'll give up before we even get halfway there. Right? That's what happens without the virtues. So, in conclusion, these long ones take a lot out of me. So fortitude is a virtue because it aims at the good, which is following what is reasonable, even when fear is in the way. Fortitude is a special virtue. It's a general virtue because all virtues really need fortitude to be steadfast, steady mind. But fortitude is special because it really helps us overcome those most difficult things like fear of death or fear of bodily harm, danger, right? Those are the big things, and that's particularly what fortitude is good for. Fortitude is also about fear and daring, right? It helps us not to run away from the good because of fear. It helps us not to be too daring when there's no reason to be daring. It properly orders us to the good and to what is reasonable. Fortitude is about fear and danger of death. It's really not about the little soft, easy things. It's about the big hard things, right? Danger of death. Fortitude is in pursuit of the good, sense, right? The good and what is that which reason guides us to. Endurance is a chief act of fortitude, right? Continue, even though it's difficult. Is an important part of fortitude. It's not to be aggressive, but to defend. So fortitude is for the ultimate end, but you practice on it through practicing it on the proximate ends. Fortitude is not always pleasurable, right? There can be a certain delight in being a fortuitous, not fortuitous. Well, there's delight in being a brave person, right? There is delight in bravery, but when it's actually, the rubber hits the road and it's dealing with death and pain, you might not delight in it anymore, but at least you're okay with it knowing uh, that it's for a greater good. It's for a greater spiritual good. Fortitude deals with things that are sudden. It also deals with things that are foreseen. It deals with dangers, whether they're foreseen or not. Anger can be used for fortitude as long as it is moderated by reason. Fortitude is a cardinal virtue because it's a principal virtue which other virtues are rooted in, and it also is a necessary element for the other virtues, including creating steadfastness with the other virtues. Fortitude is connected with the other cardinal virtues because prudence sets us on the path, justice tells us where we're going, and fortitude keeps us from giving up when we get afraid, and temperance later will tell us to stay on the path even when there are pleasurable things off the path. This is long enough, so I will just end it here. So see you when we move on to the next question, question 124.